Hello students! In this presentation we will cover the differences between non-renewable, renewable, and inexhaustible energy sources. Some examples of each type will be given along with some additional facts. By the time you are finished viewing this presentation, you should be able to name various energy sources and classify each as non-renewable, renewable, or inexhaustible. Let's get started. Let's start by providing a simple definition of what energy means. We will define energy as the ability to do work. Now, when we say work, we are not referring to a student's homework, classwork, or a chore that needs to be done. What we mean is that some kind of force can be applied to move or manipulate something in the real world. So energy gives us the ability to manipulate real-world objects. For example, electricity is often used as one means of making a motor rotate. The rotation of the motor can then be used to lift an object, say open a garage door. In this case, the electrical energy is giving us the ability to do work. No matter what the energy source is, however, all energy sources can be broadly classified into one of three categories: non-renewable, renewable, and inexhaustible. We will discuss what each of these three categories mean and give examples of each. But first, it is important to know that energy cannot simply be created. It must come from somewhere. In the case of planet Earth, almost all the energy we use comes from the sun. By one means or another, every energy source we discuss in this presentation is sourced from the sun. If the sun were to just stop giving us light and heat one day, the human race would find it slightly better than impossible to survive. But don't worry, the sun is not going away anytime soon. Before we continue with specific examples of each of the three types of energy sources, we will see if you have been paying attention so far. Answer this question. First, let's talk about non-renewable energy sources. Any energy sources that cannot be replaced once used are considered non-renewable. The classic example of a non-renewable energy source is a fossil fuel. Most of our energy needs are currently met by using fossil fuels because they are easy to find and use. However, they do create a lot of pollution when burned. Fossil fuels are formed from the remains of living organisms which decompose over a long period of time. By long period of time, we are talking hundreds of millions of years, hence the classification as a non-renewable energy source. That pile of coals that you burned in a matter of minutes to make hamburgers at the last family picnic won't be replenished until way after you and many of your descendants have died. Similar things can be said about oil and natural gas, which are also fossil fuels. What takes weeks to drill, transport, refine, and get to consumers like you and me will take millions of years for Mother Nature to replace. There are other forms of non-renewable energy, but before we take a look at the next one, let's also talk about what it means when we refer to an alternative energy source. Sometimes students get non-renewable and alternative energies mixed up. They are not necessarily the same thing. An alternative energy is any fuel that is not identified as a fossil fuel. It is possible that a non-renewable energy source is an alternative energy source. Obviously, coal, oil, and natural gas are not forms of alternative energy. However, the next example is both non-renewable and alternative. Uranium is non-renewable, just like fossil fuels, because it takes way too long to replenish. Uranium atoms were formed billions of years ago in supernovas. However, it is also considered an alternative energy source because it is not a fossil fuel. Uranium is used as an energy source because the atoms naturally decay, or split apart. They generate a lot of heat. This heat is harnessed to create steam. Just as with fossil fuels, the steam is used to make turbines rotate which are connected to generators. As the generators turn, electricity is produced. The steam then cools, condenses, and is reheated by the decaying uranium. Unlike fossil fuels, there is far less pollution created. Nevertheless, only about 20% of the world's electricity comes from nuclear power plants. As evident from Chernobyl, and more recently in Japan, nuclear energy can cause radioactive damage to the environment, so many of the world's power-hungry countries, including the United States, have not relied on nuclear power as a primary source of energy. This ends our discussion on non-renewable energy sources. Before we move on to renewable energy sources, answer this question. And here is a second question. Renewable energy sources are the opposite of non-renewable energy sources. Renewable energy sources can be easily replaced after being used. One example of renewable energy is an animal. Humans have been using animals to do work for thousands of years. For example, the dogs in this picture are pulling a sled. Here the dogs are quite literally working. They are applying a force to move the sled. Animals are a lot easier to replace than fossil fuels or uranium, in that when one grows old and dies, a younger one will grow up to take its place. The younger generation of animal is constantly replaced by the older one. Food is also a renewable energy source. Humans like to eat. In fact, we need to eat frequently to live. Our bodies then digest this food to provide energy for us to do work. Fortunately, our food can be easily grown from year to year, and now that we live in a modern global economy, food can be replaced in supermarkets within a matter of days. A third example of renewable energy is biomass, which includes just about any organic material which can either be burned or refined. It is easy to replace. Wood, as well as dry animal dung, can be used to create fire. Fortunately, we don't need to use dry animal dung, at least in the developed world anymore, because in recent decades, biomasses have been refined to make biofuels. Examples of biofuels include ethanol, which is refined from crops like corn and sugarcane, and methanol, which can be refined from wood and coal. It can also be made by combining carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen. Both ethanol and methanol are being used to replace fossil fuels like petroleum and natural gas. One popular blend of fuel is called E85, which is 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline. There also exists an M85, which is 85% methanol. Most modern vehicles can only handle about 10% ethanol, so special vehicles are being produced to safely use the higher blend. These are known as flex fuel vehicles. All right, here's a quick question about renewable energy sources. Please take a moment to answer it. The third category of energy sources is inexhaustible. Energy sources that are classified as inexhaustible are sources which are continuously available, meaning that they are not used up. Unlike the other two categories we have discussed, please note that continuously available is not the same as constantly available. Some inexhaustible energy sources have intermittent availability. One example of an inexhaustible energy source is hydroelectric. Hydroelectric energy production uses the flow of water from waterfalls and dams to produce electricity, just like you see here in this picture. Like a nuclear reactor, electricity is produced by a rotating generator. Unlike a nuclear reactor, there is no fuel which is consumed. Hydroelectric dams rely on gravity to move water past a turbine to create electricity. The generated electricity can then be transported to distant cities for consumption. Since we never run out of gravity, and the water is constantly being replenished by the Earth's water cycle, we say that hydroelectric energy is inexhaustible. However, there are other forms of inexhaustible energy sources. Tidal energy also uses moving water to create electricity. Instead of using Earth's gravity like a hydroelectric dam would to power a generator, the natural tides of the oceans are used. The incoming and outgoing tide caused by the gravitational pull from the moon can be used in two ways. One is to simply harness the energy as it flows in and out, as seen in this picture on the right. Another way is to capture the water with a dam at high tide and then release its potential energy in a controlled fashion during low tide, as seen in this picture on the left. Tidal systems, such as the second example, are useful to supplement solar systems because they can be used to generate electricity in the later hours of the day and during the night. Before we move on to the last two examples of inexhaustible energy sources, Fill in the blanks to complete this sentence. Speaking of solar energy, which is another example of inexhaustible energy, there are two ways that it can be used. One way is to produce electricity from the sun. This is known as photovoltaic. Special panels can be installed on the roof of a building, which directly converts light to electricity. Such technologies are gaining popularity in recent decades and have been used extensively in space, as seen in this photo of the International Space Station. This is an extremely clean way to produce electricity, but it does have a major drawback. No electricity can be produced at night or when very cloudy. A second way is to use the sun to create heat. This heat can then be used to create hot water in a home, or in the case of the picture in the lower left, create steam at a power plant. The steam then produces a turbine attached to a generator to create electricity. Geothermal plants like the one in this image take advantage of the intense heat underneath the Earth's crust. Pipes can be installed 1 kilometer or deeper into the ground. Water is then injected into a reservoir where it is heated to make steam. The steam then works its way back up a second pipe to a plant where it is used to rotate a turbine connected to a generator which produces electricity. This is a very clean way to produce electricity, as the only byproduct is excess steam, as can be seen in this picture of a geothermal plant in Iceland. The Earth's crust is thin in Iceland, making it relatively easy to harness the geothermal energy. About 25% of Iceland's electrical production comes from geothermal plants. In the United States, geothermal plants are only available west of the Rocky Mountains because the crust is thicker east of the Rockies. It is also possible to use a shallower system in smaller applications such as a home or building. Because the ground remains at a near constant temperature year-round, pipes can be placed 3 to 10 feet underground and used to keep a house cool in the summer by pumping heat into the ground to be cooled, or heat can be pumped out of the ground to keep a house warm in the winter. This kind of system is known as a heat pump and does not produce electricity directly, but can be used to reduce the home's electrical consumption. A typical system like this can pump about 3 to 4 units of heat energy with only 1 unit of electrical energy consumption, making it highly energy efficient. This last example of inexhaustible energy sources is wind. Just like water could be used in a hydroelectric dam to produce electricity, so can wind be harnessed. As the wind blows across the blades of the wind turbine's generator, it spins, which produces electricity. This is an extremely clean way to produce electricity, but it has one major drawback. If there is no wind blowing, then there is no electricity being produced. Okay, this about wraps up the presentation on energy sources, but before we are done, here is one last question for you.